Welcome to Wellsprings of Faith. My name is Father Liias. I am a Roman Catholic priest and a resident, as I've been for almost 30 years here in the community of Melrose, and I'm presently working on the staff of St. Patrick's Roman Catholic Church in Stoneham, which is in the neighboring community. Our program, Wellsprings of Faith, is a program about the journey of faith in a person's life and the fruit of that faith in their life and in the life of our world. It's a great joy to welcome a dear friend and a colleague, Father John Macinnis. Most recently, he was the pastor of St. John the Baptist Church in Peabody, where he was for many years. He's recently retired from that and is now declared, as I am, a senior priest. But priests never retire, so we're still carrying on a rich ministry, which we'll hear about in this time. He also has the unfortunate task of being my confessor. So he knows everything about me, but he can't tell you any of it under the seal of the confessional. But thank you, John, Father, for coming and being with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you, Jürgen, for the opportunity to kind of share a little bit of my faith journey with the folks out there.
Yeah.
I guess the best place to start is at the beginning of it
all.
Yes. 77 years ago. I was born and brought up in Somerville, an area called the 10 Hills,
right.
Not far from Winter Hill, which is kind of notorious for the Winter Hill gang, but we weren't part of that. We had our own sort of gangs.
Well, I grew up in a tougher neighborhood, Charlestown.
Oh, couldn't compare. The townies. So, and then brought into the family of God at St. Polycarp's Church, no longer an active Catholic church, on the feast of St. Polycarp.
That's where you were baptized?
February 23rd, that's where I was baptized.
Oh,
isn't that wonderful?
Well, that was creative of your parents.
It was, it was. I don't know that they even thought about it, but you know, it was the date. And of course, in those days, I mean, it was just within 3 weeks of being born.
You kind of
didn't waste any time.
Did it quickly, right.
But I was gifted with a wonderful family. My parents and I had 3 siblings, 2 sisters, an older sister, Mary, and my brother, Jim, and then a younger sister, Pat. So we grew up there in this wonderful neighborhood. It seems like everybody I knew was Catholic, so I didn't really know there were any other kind of people.
Well, that's true in Charlestown, too, except for me.
But it was, and I had the opportunity to be part of a wonderful parish community there. There were several priests, and one of them, a young priest, was kind of the inspiration for my vocation to the priesthood. Really? But it really started when he invited me to be an altar server. So I was an altar boy growing up, which meant that I...
Generally, when did you start that? How old were you?
I think probably around the 4th grade.
4th grade,
something like that.
Right.
Yeah. And of course, that was the old Mass, the Latin Mass. So I had to learn Latin. I didn't know what I was saying, but I assumed it was okay. And but some good examples of older priests and then this young priest who kind of inspired me and kind of helped me along. So I started off in public schools, so I have kind of a sense of what it's like, you know, public education, and that was fine. And then moved into the our local parish school, St. Polycarp School, and from there to St. Mary's in Cambridge. So that was kind of a new world. I had to take 2 buses to get to high school, so I think everyone knows high school is a whole new experience. But for me, it was leaving the local neighborhood, meeting some wonderful friends. And again, great priests. Another young priest there who was very close to a lot of the students. And I had some wonderful relationships with the Sisters of Notre Dame, which was to last my lifetime. Everywhere I've been in my life, the Sisters of Notre Dame of Namur have been there. And,
well, you know, just that picture, because I know that was true for me too. There's, you know, there often is, and most people I come in the ministry, there's a kind of model of whether it's in the Protestant world, a minister, or in the Catholic world, a priest. And the Lord just, and that's kind of humbling to know in yourself that, you know, hopefully you're not a stumbling block, but maybe an inspiration to someone to recall a vocation to the
So I think in those younger years, a couple of things. This is interesting. People may be interested in.
Yeah.
And you know, when you're a boy growing up, you imagine yourself in different roles, and you play soldier, policeman. Well, I used to play Mass at the family dinner table, and I found a number of my friends, and even younger priests. It was similar to that. It was just something about the Mass that really inspired us, and we wanted to do it. So we had.
Now, as a Protestant, my mother says I did the same thing.
Really?
So I must have been early. My Catholic leaning started when I was about 8 years old.
And if anyone remembers Necco wafers, they were the perfect size host. And they tasted good. So that was an interesting sort of thing. I think a kind of important emotional experience I had was the death of several members of my family. First of all, my grandparents, two of my grandparents when I was in elementary school, my mother's dad and then my father's mother, who lived upstairs with us. And I remember that had quite an impact. And then my grandfather, my dad's father, my senior year of high school. And then just after I entered the seminary, my father died very suddenly. He was only 52 years old. Wow. And so death was no stranger to me. And I think that those are kind of growing up moments, sometimes growing up faster than we want to.
Did you have any clergy in your family? Or religious?
Good question. Yes, I had.
In those days, most Irish families had a few.
Well, I had a priest and two sisters.
Oh.
Right, two sisters of mercy who served in outside of the area. But I also had, and I only met him as a priest much later, a Jesuit priest, Father Lynn Ma, who taught literature at Holy Cross College. And but I didn't really.
He was a relative, but not a close
relative, but not a close one or anything like that. Wow. So one of these two priests, one day when I was looking at colleges and starting to apply, took me to the seminary. We called it a minor seminary. That's the first few years of college, where you would begin right from high school.
Right.
And it was a funny thing. It was not a very inviting sort of building. It sort of looked like a prison. Wall around it, very severe kind of looking. But I went through it and I saw the chapel, and it was one of these things that just,
Is that the old St. John's, the same one that's still there?
No, this would have been Cardinal O'Connell.
O'Connell, where was that located?
In Jamaica Plain.
Oh, all right.
Yeah,
all right.
It's no longer there. But at the time, there were so many vocations. There were 80 men who entered with me, most of them right out of high school.
Wow.
In their first year. Now, about 30 of those would have made it all the way through.
Yeah.
Because it was a long 8-year program. But those were good years. We studied philosophy, and I enjoyed philosophy. That really kind of caught my attention. And
before we get to the seminary, do you remember a specific moment or experience that crystallized a sense of call to the priesthood?
Nothing more than sort of that invitation to just consider it. I mean, there are lots of masses. I mean, I had made my sacraments and things.
Right.
But there was no one sort of spiritual experience. As I say, on the human side of things, I think the impact of losing someone that you love.
Yeah, you said that.
On a personal level, and maybe just wanting to be able to give the comfort that I received from the Lord. In those circumstances.
And were there, for you, I mean, obviously, particularly Roman Catholic priesthood, it's obviously a vocation, not only the priesthood, but a commitment to celibacy and not having a family and all those kinds. Were some of those struggles for you and those as you made that decision?
Well, they were. I mean, everyone is dating and going to the dances and things like that. But I sort of realized as I was being drawn toward it that, somehow the Lord would allow me, or give me the grace to sort of be able to commit myself. And it's interesting, one of the things I remember about one of my friends, his name was Joe Russo, who's eventually, his family operated a funeral home in Boston. And he said to me, and he had a girlfriend, we're going to marry our girlfriends. You're going to marry the church. So I kind of had, that was,
so you had a girlfriend,
celibacy
so
101.
to speak.
I did, right.
Right.
So it was, but it was just, it was exciting. I made a lot of friends, and that's what I think I found out about the priesthood from the friendships that I made right from the start at the seminary, is that, the most important thing in life is friendship. And the best thing I've ever heard a husband saying of a wife or vice versa, she is my best friend.
Best friend, yeah.
Right? And so the level of friendships that we had, sharing our struggles and what have you, was very, very important in terms of shaping my sense that I could find people, to be close to, and I could have companionship, but it wouldn't be exclusively with one person alone.
Well, I think sometimes people forget that particularly in the Roman Catholic universe, which as a new Catholic, sort of getting to know and become familiar with, but community, religious life and celibacy and religious life is not a life of isolation, with the exception of maybe hermits who choose that. But really, it's a life in a community.
It is.
Absolutely. And that's like Jesus gathered 12 men around himself, and the brotherhood of, and that's a rich.
And that community for a diocesan priest, because it's funny, I think one of my moments of vocation, a little inspiration came when I was in the elementary school of St. Polycarp's, and they used to bring boys over to the novitiate of the Maryknoll Fathers in Jamaica Plain. And I was quite impressed. I must say at that particular moment I was really struck by the dedication and the sense of courage and exploration to go off to places like China, Japan, things like that. But it's interesting, the more I felt drawn to the priesthood, it was to be a diocesan priest, because it was the priesthood that I knew in the parish, St. Polycarp's, and then St. Mary's, and then throughout my life. And that's kind of where we find our family. But it's also with other priests, and I've been blessed. All of the years that I've been a priest, I've always lived with other priests, maybe one or two, or a couple of times, I was in the seminary, St. John's and the North American College, so we had plenty of priests there. And that's been a way in which to find that unique kind of companionship.
And unfortunately, with the shortage of priests, at least from my kind of experience as a new Catholic and a new Catholic priest, that's a bit a challenge now because of the shortage of priests.
It is.
Priests are living alone in rectories.
And Cardinal Sean has really encouraged us, and I try to encourage my brother priests as they're looking for places to go, to consider living in a rectory. That's why I came to St. Pius.
Yeah.
I knew the two priests there. One had been a spiritual directee of mine in the 90s. He's now the pastor. And the other had been a young seminarian from Uganda who was discerning a vocation, and the seminary invited him to live at a parish, and they asked us to take him in. And it's been wonderful to get to know him and his vocation story. So it's always been important, I think, for priests to have close relationships with other priests. I've had several, as you know, one of my very dear friends was the late Bishop of Manchester, Bishop John McCormick. We were friends for about 40 years. Father George Moran, lots and lots of priests that, because we live a very unique life. And therefore it takes something of that experience that we can share and dwell upon and reflect upon. But also the support of the people. And, for those of you who are out there, regardless of who your pastor is or your denomination, remember it's important for them to know you love them and that you show them that love. And I've had wonderful people in all of the parishes who've made it possible for me, to live faithful to the promises that I've made. And it's been just a wonderful thing.
Yeah, again, in my preparation for becoming a Catholic, I remember reading, the documents of Vatican II, and one of the, I think, shifts, and if I'm not right, correct me, a little bit in the emphasis of what is the church is this image of a lot of images and metaphors of the church, but the idea of the family of God.
Absolutely.
And the parish really be an expression of a kind of familial life.
And it builds on our human instinct as a man or woman to be a father or a mother.
Right.
And so that has been so very, very important to me. Mentioning Vatican II, Father Jurgen, I wanted to say a little bit about the later years of my formation. So after I was in Boston at Cardinal O'Connell and then St. Clement's Hall, Jamaica Plain and Brighton, I was sent to the North American College.
In Rome.
And that was kind of a really turning point in my life, because I was leaving home for the first time. I was going to Rome, and when you were assigned, you were to be there for 4 years. You wouldn't come home. So it was really leaving home, this 21-year-old young man, and all of a sudden I'm in a different country, a different culture, learning a different language. And so, and that exactly were the years, you know, from 1962 to 65 of the council going on.
So you were there when the council was going on?
Well, it just ended. I arrived in 66. In fact, I went to a mass that was presided over by Pope St. Paul VI, celebrating the anniversary of the closing of the council.
Okay.
But many of the professors that I had in Rome, it's an interesting way that you do seminary formation. So you live in a college with people of your own country. So the North American College is the seminary for American students studying in Rome. But then you go to a university, an international university. So I was sent to the Gregorian, the Jesuit university, and many of the teachers that I had were very much involved in shaping the documents of Vatican II. They were periti, or behind-the-scenes people. And so I was learning theology. In fact, when you mentioned the document on the church, I remember the professor that taught ecclesiology, who, by the way, was an American, Father Frank Sullivan, talking about how it was drafted to look very institutional, like a business type of thing, you know, up. And then it was all of a sudden turned around, and the first chapter, the mystery of the church. And how do we know a mystery? Only through those analogs, those things that are similar in our experience, and they each capture something of the nature of the church. And of course, one of them is a family. So that was a phenomenal experience, really, to live, you know, in a different country. I think it just broadened my outlook. And that's actually where I began getting to know a little bit about the work of ecumenism, because there was a center, the Centro Pro Unione, at the Piazza Navona, which was when, you know, and this was, of course, really the beginnings of a really active ecumenical spirit in the Catholic Church, very much promoted, and had the opportunity to meet some wonderful people there, getting to know a little bit more about the traditions and taking courses. So
that kind of reminds me of actually the first way I met you was when I was still an Anglican Episcopal priest, and we were part of a evangelical Catholic dialogue group.
Right.
Again, was one of the many dialogue groups that really were birthed out of Vatican II with all. There was a Catholic Church, and then, of course, there are hundreds of Protestant churches. So you're having all these different conversations with different denominations.
But that's been really a significant part of my personal growth in the faith, as well as theological understanding, is to sit down and to get to really know people. It's one thing to study theology. And in Rome, when we studied, say, the church, you know, we would go through the centuries, the developments, we would look at the Reformation. But an interesting sort of point that was made, I think actually in Nostra Aetate, which is the document on the church's relationship with other faiths, you know, beginning with Judaism, Islam, and things like that. And the encouragement for us always to learn the faith of another through another. That is, you tell me your faith, because it's always, well, Protestants believe this or Jews believe that. And so a really enriching part of my life has been to get to know evangelicals, you know, every denomination practically of Christians, and then the Jewish community and what have you.
Well, of course, that all was a revolution. I mean, going back to our childhoods, you in Somerville and me in Charlestown. I mean, you know, basically we did not go into, we were, I think Catholics were, and we weren't so much forbidden, but we still didn't do it, even allowed to go into other churches. And there really was a sense, this is an alien religion, not that, as the documents say, other churches were separated brethren. I mean, there is obviously a problem of disunity, but it doesn't mean we're not brothers and sisters.
But it's going back to that fundamental, you know, unity that we know in a family. You know, that's the foundation, and which we know is such a challenge today. But you know, when you think about it, all of us who are baptized Christians, wherever we were baptized, to know that we're brothers and sisters obliges us, I think, to get to know each other. But it's also, you know, as I know the world, partly through my sisters and my brother, you know, it's like I know the church through you or any other brother or sister. And if I could just pick up on, you know, that evangelical Roman Catholic dialogue. So that kind of came out of an assignment that I had. In addition, I was, in the 1980s, I was a chaplain at Harvard University, the Catholic Center there, and Cardinal Law appointed me as the ecumenical officer. So we started, there were already in existence dialogues going on with the Anglican or Episcopal Church, mostly,
Right.
and Lutherans, Methodists. But we just kind of broke new ground with evangelicals because that seemed like, well, we don't have so much in common as far as maybe, institutional structures or sacraments. And yet that has proven, first of all, it's long lasting, as you know, we continue to meet. But it has helped me personally to grow. I think of so many wonderful evangelicals that I've come to know, but I also think of people's journeys like yours. And of course, one of my sort of spiritual mentors, historical mentors, was John Henry Newman. And his going from, evangelical to Anglican to Catholic, well, for me, it's kind of reverse. I haven't become an evangelical minister. I haven't changed churches, but I've become more evangelical in my spiritual life and in my pastoral life, in my preaching. And that's been a great blessing for me. The ease with which our evangelical brothers and sisters speak of their personal relationship with Christ. I think growing up, I had some of that, but it was always kind of formal. And I think, praying with you as we do and praying with them just opens up this capacity that all of us have to have a close personal relationship with Jesus. Right. And that's been a real gift.
Yeah, and of course I grew up an Episcopalian, so in many ways I also was primarily, my faith was institutional and more, or I don't know what they're, formal.
Right.
And in my life too, it was an encounter with the
charismatic,
which really came out of the Protestant Pentecostalism.
Right.
Things like that, and really similarly. So now look, we're almost out of time, and we haven't. I don't think we got you ordained yet, or barely.
Okay. So
you're still in Rome.
I'm still in Rome,
and I've known you well enough to know you've had such a rich ministry. We have to have you come back. You got more time now that you're retired, anyway.
Sure.
Because I know you've been trained and has had a significant life of. As a spiritual director, which is a whole unique ministry. You said you're a college chaplain and involved with ecumenism. But we got about 5 minutes left. Can you sum up your 75 years of life and 50? How many years since your ordination as a priest?
Then 52.
52 years as a priest.
So there I was at age 20.
What are some of the highlights or lowlights? Because you've been through a lot in the church these last 50 years. Wow.
Well, just to start where we left off with Rome, because I was ordained in Rome. That's no longer the case with seminarians. They come home for their priestly ordination. But I was ordained at St. Peter's.
Wow, that must be something.
In 1969.
And who ordained you?
Bishop Hickey, who eventually became
was an
Cardinal
American
Hickey.
bishop?
Yeah.
You didn't get ordained by the Pope. You didn't do the ordination.
No, I didn't. Missed that one.
I suppose that'd take a lot of work if you had to ordain.
But then coming home, went into a Presentation Parish in Brighton, a real working class, wonderful community of people, and was there for 4 years. Then invited back to the North American on the faculty to teach homiletics and to do some spiritual direction with seminarians, and also to work on a doctorate, which I eventually finished up in pastoral theology. Then in the 80s at Harvard, which was a great experience. The 90s, seminary ministry again at St. John's in St. John's Seminary, and then St. John the Baptist Parish in Peabody. And the last 21 years, until I became senior priest, was really kind of finally going where I thought I was going when I started out, which was parish.
Were those all 21 years at St. John's?
Yep.
Were that long? So that's unusually long.
It is the longest I've been anywhere in my life.
And
it was wonderful, the people that I came to know. Vibrant Hispanic community, so I had just learned a little bit of Spanish, so I had the opportunity to do that. And I just, that again has been such an enriching experience too. We created a sister parish in the Dominican Republic, so going down there and seeing how people live and building relationships. And then the last assignment, in addition to St. John's, was St. Thomas.
Yes.
So St. Thomas the Apostle Parish is a little smaller parish right on the border between Salem and Peabody. And shortly after becoming pastor there, they said, oh, would you welcome a Brazilian community? I said, sure, why not? And we've had a tremendous experience, almost like revitalization of the parish, because the Brazilians that we have there, I think it's probably true of many Brazilian communities around the diocese, are very young, lots of families, lots of children, and a great personal spirit
Yeah, a
of
lot
Jesus.
of zeal for the Lord. Yeah.
So it's been quite a ride, as they say.
Yeah, and I must confess, I've been impressed that knowing you, and I'm a little younger than you, but not much. You know, even learning Portuguese. You know,
Right.
I mean, to pick up a new language in your 70s is.
I think, yeah, when I was in my 70s, so people must have thought I was crazy. Well, they knew I liked to travel, so I said, well, he probably just wants to go to Brazil, right? Why not? Well, if you go there, why not learn the language? So that's what I did. I just plunked myself down in Rio, went to an intensive course, one-on-one, lived in a rectory where no one spoke English, and then did a little bit of travel.
Wow.
But, you know, language is such an opportunity to kind of connect with people. And that's what I said. I'm not going to be fluent. I mean, don't ask me even a question in Portuguese. But to be able to celebrate the Eucharist
the Mass,
with the people in my community was so beautiful.
I must confess, one of the wonderful pieces in my life of becoming a Catholic is discovering Catholicism, not as a faith or as a theological system or any of that, but Catholic in the sense of all the people.
Right.
When someone says Catholicism, here comes everybody,
Right.
isn't that right? And, you know, every Mass, and this is true, even though, you know, a church in Stoneham is mostly white, but there's still a lot of black and Asian and Filipinos and this sense, you know, I jokingly say, I hope if any Episcopalians are watching this, they won't be offended. We were always big on trying to be inclusive as an Episcopal church. Well, the Catholic Church is just by nature inclusive.
Oh,
it's got everybody,
right.
and it's actually part of what really is such a richness of experience for us as priests.
Yeah, and for me, as I think I've indicated a little bit, and I could tell many more stories, just being able to travel and experience the church around the world has been so enriching. And I think that that's one of the great gifts of the Catholic Church, you know, to Christendom, to Christianity, but certainly in our country, because I think we're struggling, as we all know, with trying to be, you know, inclusive and welcoming and things, but to do it in a meaningful sort of way. I mean, the beautiful thing about Catholicism is it's maintained its identity.
Yes.
It hasn't just sort of been absorbed into other cultures. It's actually taken those other cultures into itself and been enriched, or mutually enriching.
Mutually enriched, right. Well, we're just about out of time. One thing you're especially looking forward to doing now in your retirement. We got a minute to.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. As I said, priests never, you know, retire, but
we just move into something new. Well, for me, what I'm looking forward to, and I'm working with the diocese, ongoing formation of priests. You know, we never stop growing. And that's something that I did in the 90s. When I mentioned seminary ministry, I should have said I also worked with priests, providing opportunities for them to keep learning. So that's what I want to do now. I want to share something of what I've learned with younger priests. And again, going back to the importance of priests being together, building priestly fraternity. I know you belong to priestly fraternity. So I hope that if the Lord gives me, you know, years and good health, that I can help my brother priests to keep growing and growing along with them. That's honestly the excitement about, you know, being a senior priest. I have time to read for the first time in my life, and do things that I want to do. So I want to share that with my brothers.
Well, blessings on this new chapter in your life.
Thank you.
And a wonderful, rich. Sorry, we couldn't get into the weeds of all those 50 years of priestly ministry. Maybe another time. And thank you also for your ministry to me as a confessor and a spiritual director. That's been a very important part of my life and my ministry here. So blessings, and
thank you. It's great to be with you.
May God prosper you, prosper our handiwork.
God bless us all.
As the psalmist says, yes. Thank you
Absolutely.
for joining us for this interview with Father Macinnis. I hope it's been informative and even more inspirational, and may you also grow in your knowledge of the Lord and His love and the gift of life and the riches of life serving Him. God bless.